So, you've heard from us. This is your opportunity to do some work. So, I'd love to present to you Annetta, Dr. Annetta Tonariu. Just about got that right. She's a chartered psychologist with the British Psychological Society. She's a principal lecturer in psychology and the head of psychological intervention subject area in the School of Psychology at the University of East London. And she's going to take you through a workshop now. And we're hopefully going to break at 11:15 for coffee, because I don't know about you, but I get a dry throat. So, welcome, Dr. Annetta.
It's a pleasure to be here, and the first two speakers have portrayed a complex and very poignant picture, and one that requires us to understand the big picture but not get lost in a big picture. And also, I look forward to hear what your own experiences and your own interests and ways forward. It is what we know, not what one person knows, it's what we know. I am from the University of East London, which is a district of London that's challenging, economically challenging and socially challenging. And we do there a number of projects in the community, but also we develop interventions and so on. The word resilience was mentioned, and I hope today we'll talk a little more of what does that mean. And I hope you will be able to share the fact that you already both facilitate resilience and are resilient yourself. Before I go on what I had to say, just something came to mind as I was hearing the speakers. And the films were very effective. I think it's very moving. What reminded me of is that we first born biologically alive, and we have a system, including parents and nurses and doctors, to help us remain biologically alive and physically healthy. Then, as we grow up, through those 1,000 days and beyond, we become cognitively alive. And we need the support and the systems that help promote our cognitive abilities. Then we become socially alive. Again, we need relationships that are positive, modeling, and relationships that allow us to develop an individual sense of self, but learn how to be connected. And the thing that I would like to add, it's something that connects us as a community, connects us as professionals, but also as parents or as human beings. We then have the task of becoming existentially alive. And that's something that the human history has been preoccupied with from the beginning. That's to do with character building, that's to do with meaning in life, that's to do with self-actualization. To become existentially alive, it takes the grit and the ability to confront the limitations of life, but do it with resilience and purpose. The journey of becoming existentially alive, as Dalai Lama and all the gurus will tell you, goes all the way. But early on in childhood, especially when we don't have the emotional maturity to self-soothe, if a child is too early thrown into the reality of life, such as you can't take mom and dad for granted, you have to take care of yourself. If you're too early thrown into even bullying or rejection, if you can imagine or remember, as a child comes with the first drawing and says, "Mommy, Daddy, look what I did," that first reaction tells the child who he can be, one, and two, what are other people likely to be like? So that first rejection or that first ability to celebrate, this is you, just carry on, already shapes. So others have written about it. Ronnie Lang has done an extraordinarily good job in his book, The Divided Self. I've got 2 copies of it. It's worth remembering it, wonderful. The Divided Self is a tiny book, Penguin book, and he speaks of his own ACEs. He was a psychiatrist in the 1970s who took an anti-psychiatry movement here in the UK. He was Scottish of origin. And he himself would have ticked probably 4, and if there were more ACEs, he would have ticked them all. And he spoke of what happens if a child is thrown in too early into the existential journey of confronting his own solace and making his own meaning. And what happens? The child becomes, what he says, existentially, ontologically insecure. Pompous word which means, I don't know how to be me. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I can do. So then the child begins to create a lot of mechanisms that keeps people away and hides himself into a corner. and it becomes very detached from the real self. So that came to mind also, and looking at this approach, which I'm going to touch on, looking at the work with ACEs in terms of the theory about it and what we can do about it together, if we look at that through the invitation to say, there are personal assets. If we can tap onto them, we tap onto an ability to stimulate self-actualization. We tap into an ability that unites us all, and we tap into an ability that can provide transformative healing. So what I would like to do today, and it's your turn to talk first of all, I want to just give you a sense of what the second workshop will be about. Is an invitation to, see if I can make this work. To take the notion of an asset-based or positive approach to theory and practice. And to use the term positive, not in a belittling way to say we ignore everything that's negative. Quite the opposite is to look at what works well in spite of, is to understand what is not working, to understand what hurts, park it, but also look at what works in spite of that. And another thought I had as the speakers were presenting, and if I may use this in a symbolic way, Freud once said that the cure is in the pain. Now that established the entire medical system and a very successful pharmaceutical projects. But if you take it symbolically, the story of that kid, listening to his story, told us not only the pain, but inside there is the cure. And I hope that's what we tap on today. Also, what is exciting about taking that perspective is that we get a sense of how personal development is intertwined with professional development. When you work with children or when you work with adults who are still tackling childhood experiences, you cannot help but resonate inside at some level. And it resonates with us in some level by maybe awakening unpolished aspects of our own development or a sense of existential inability to make a difference. I don't know if you found yourself, but every time I am involved in projects, I feel I have so much to say and so much to do. There's an urgency about it. And that comes from a reaction that is common to all of us, the drive to self-actualize, and also the need to confront the existential conflicts, the existential aspects of being alive. And I can talk about existentialism a lot, but in terms of here is the reality of the finitude of life. Life is, as we saw, quite short. And the awakening of life is short brings in us an urgency to do something. Also, when we see trauma or pain, whether we like it or not, it awakes in us our own trauma, our own pain, and we have to confront that somewhere. And if we remain stressed and tense, and then we become even more frustrated about the limitations of life. There are not enough money. There will never be enough money to deal with this. And there is so much to do. The parents repeat the same story. We repeat a story because it hasn't been resolved. And then we can see how repetition, inability, you firefighting all the time. If we park that for a while, and we get a sense of the message from the positive psychology and existential positive psychology, I hope to persuade you of something today. Something that just adds to the scaffold you already have. You are professionals. It's just maybe a way of, I hope to persuade you of that, a way of adding another level of awareness, which I have no doubt know about it, but emphasizing it, and I hope tasting it towards the end of the day. The term positive, if we use the term positive with the intention of identifying those conditions that can optimize and support thriving, that can optimize self-actualization, that can optimize that journey of becoming at home within oneself, then we have an additional tool to our set of tools. One of the at the University of East London, we have done a number of projects, and one of the projects that we have done was in the restorative justice system. And very brief example to give you a sense of what we mean by resilience. So resilience is the ability to bounce back in spite of, to bounce back and adapt to an environment in spite of. Too much resilience can lead to further trauma. I can talk about this. But one of the tasks we had was to work with a group of 20 young people, 12 to 18, who were traumatized in high street. Shops were closing down. It was not a high street that we recognized. And parents who could not control them anymore. They gave it to me. I had them for 5 days. In the first day, I had to find a way to break the ice. And I said, if you follow my instructions, you will learn something about yourself you never knew. Oh, right, lady, really? Yeah, let's stay with, and you get pizza. And they stayed, and just give you one example, the ice-breaking example, which is something that we use often in positive psychology, but it depends how we use it. And I asked these very cool dudes with a lot of swagger to stay around the table, and we gave them a cutting of a paper man. Are you aware of that one? A cutting of a paper man, and we say, instruction, break it into pieces. They revolted. This took about 3 hours. I mean, it really was a masterpiece. Eventually, they've done the task. They broke it into pieces. Task 2, take a sellotape and put it back. They really thought, lady, you are playing with us. This is not fun. This is not cool. But I was the ridicule, and they were cool, and that's fine. And then we said, instruction number 3, break them again. Break your little men again. And eventually they started 2 hours with me. They started getting it. But we can't break it. Why can't you break it? And they start talking. You break me once, you don't break me again. If I make myself in my own design, no one can break me. This is what we are about. We survived in spite of you. And that was day 1. And they attended and they didn't want to leave. And it is why I get excited about it. It's not so much the activity. It's capturing their attention with the intent of, I'm going to see behind whatever wall you bring me. I'm going to look at what you have done. That's your strength. What is your strength? And for those young people, in spite of being a pain to the entire borough, they survived ACEs. And they were still alive, and they were still joking, and they were still cocky. And we tapped on that. And one of the guys really captured it. There's a video of it. I should have brought it. And the guy, he said, you really got me. You get me. And that just brings us to everything we know about child psychiatry. See the person that's hiding, open some doors, facilitate some relationship. You have a real good way in. So it's character development, but with awareness of we do not minimize or deny what is happening and the challenges these young people have, young, old. But can we park it for a second and imagine if we help them see their strengths. We give them a positive platform where to say, I see you. They go, you see me? Then they get creative about seeing themselves. And what we can do is, like parents have done for thousands of years, is optimize that condition where they can become the best they can. They can actualize, they can feel I know who I am. I have this quality, I like this thing, and so on. That's why I think working with trauma has 2 aspects. One is heartbreaking. The other one is many do survive and take a lot of strength from following trauma. There will come a day when I hope we have a conversation would say, there is no trauma, but how can we build character and grit? There are positive experiences and challenges that can bring grit. Football, actually, I think is done very, very well, taking all the aggression that people want, putting them together, fight, but we don't shoot each other. So there is something about the existential human condition to create, I'm better than you, you are other, I am me. But if we have the luxury to say there is no ACE, well done ACE, the hub, what are we going to do to build character? Let's worry about that then. Right now we have trauma and we have a picture that's so complex, and yet you are the heart of it. And what I hope to do today is just to add another angle for you to rethink about it. I have no doubt you know it, and I'll tell you why I say this, because this workshop, which I'm going to shut up now, but this workshop is about you tell us the work you do in spite of all the challenges. And you will just simply reiterate, and I hope welcome the message I'm saying is that by also looking at what works well and looking behind the wall, in spite of, by looking and appreciating our own resilience, we can then take our young people along with us. In any work that's therapeutic in any way, or healing, we can only take our clients, as far as we have traveled. If we still struggle with it's too much to do and I have so much to say and we have not found a way to be a home here, we will not take them that far. And that's what is one maybe curious or paradoxical aspects of working with trauma. It can be transformative. And now I will just, these are just, I will turn it over to you. These are examples of the interventions that have been done. We have done several, other people have done it, using that philosophical frame of existential positive psychology and coaching. And it covers from child education, counseling, looking also job satisfaction. You are professionals working within a structure, and organizations cannot take the message of, well, you should be more resilient. Well, where is your emotional literacy? Those lead organizations have their own challenge. We can talk about that too. So your own personal journey of feeling at home within oneself and professionalizing personal development, it's separate yet related to the job of the organizations to make a working environment for you that optimizes you at the conference. And these are the questions that we would like you to kindly consider and share with us. If I may ask that you move in groups of 8, so you turn, maybe the front row turns to the second row and so on. Is that all right? It's just to turn. Those groups of 8, that group, please stay within your group, because I have an exercise towards the end of the second workshop, which then will make sense to you. So kindly turn to your newly formed 8 people roughly group, consider these questions, and then the last 10 minutes, we will share your views with the entire grouping. All right, everyone, so group number 1 will share their thoughts in 1 minute.
Okay, is this on? Yeah. Right, so I'm Laura Tranter and I'm a service manager from Barnardo's Cymru. Our group, we had a lot of experience of working with ACEs, from psychiatry to substance misuse. And the 3 things that we found would be helpful is that ACEs give us a shortcut to explaining certain behaviours, particularly with our own colleagues. There is a common understanding, and that one of our colleagues found it really useful looking at the positivity of using experience to build character. What are the areas of support? A common language and an approach, and we would like the hub to have that common training, develop some kind of universal screening for ACEs, and a universal approach. And that the hub would be a central point of contact for all sorts of resources that you could refer professionals and service users, for want of a better word, into. And we didn't get through to the last question, sorry, we were all talking. And, but we did say that further aid our contribution to tackling ACEs would be consistency.
Wow, comprehensive, thank you so much. We'll pick up the form. Thank you. Follow that, group number 2. We're going over there? Okay, yes.
Our group talked about the importance of connecting with others, like the Watch, Wait and Wonder, staff needing to be able to ask the questions in the first place, and in order for that to happen, they need to be confident and feel they can deal with the responses. So regular short consultation times between, for example, practitioners and CAMs, psychology, psychiatrists, so that you're using the most experienced staff to share their expertise and support to other staff. We talked about the Solihull approach being very useful, and maybe that needing to be shared wider. At the moment, in our area, the health visitors are trained in that, but other practitioners need to have that resource behind them as well. And whether we need to be building ACE records into the TAF assessment clearly, and in communicating across the different professionals who would be involved in a family. And the only bit about C that I think we got was querying about whether we're going to get national guidance or whether we all just plough our own furrows, sort of thing. Anything else?
So we have an emphasis on universality and nomenclature, a very good emphasis on resourcing staff, amongst other things. Thank you. We'll pick up the form we have.
I was trying to read my writing here. I'm Chris Farr, work for Vale Healthy Schools team, Cardiff and Vale Public Health team. So again, we had a good representation here that people that were dealing with the ACEs in their sort of daily working lives. We got Clamai, the homeless charity, the Ely and Cairo Communities First, NSPCC were represented in our group, Vale Healthy Schools, myself, and the Health Impact Assessment Unit, and how do I say this? IRO, is it? IRO Counselling. So I think the things we talked about that haven't been mentioned already were probably about the evaluation. So what can we use to evaluate what we're doing, and very importantly, what works, and particularly in relation to the intervention side of it. So we know the problem, but what works to actually to sort of solve the problem and cut things off. And we just talked a bit about, things that are going on in our settings. And we also came up with the idea of, we need to think consistently across Wales, what approach works rather than just doing things independently. I think that was it, unless anyone else wants to interrupt me.
Thank you. So emphasis on how do we evaluate the work we do, and again, being aligned to a group project rather than individual work. Number 3.
Year, so we're currently on.
Becky, we can't hear.
Hi, sorry, we're all student nurses in our 3rd year of our mental health nursing training, and we're all currently on placement at the moment. So we recognised how our service users, who we come across mostly in acute services and crisis services, all have experiences of ACEs. And we felt it would allow us to better support our service users with better links to services. We can use the evidence base from the legislation to support our interventions and our care plans, and this will help us contribute to holistic care. We also thought it would be very helpful this was brought into our training, so we had better awareness of it before we went into practice.
So emphasis on holistic care. Thank you. The other group?
I hope people will interrupt me when I don't say everything that we said, which was quite a lot. 3 things that were found helpful. Sorry. We talked about this extensively. I think we perhaps spent too long on some things, but I think the consensus was that the problems have always been recognised and people have suspected that where they were coming from. But the ideas around this haven't been developed until now. So really what would be helpful is some answers. But we also recognised that these solutions are going to be for the individual child. And maybe I'm crossing the questions here. Okay. But there are interventions, particularly in things like youth services, where basically they're working from 4 tools. And there's a sort of assumption that all children, young people, will respond in the same length of time, that they'll all need the same, perhaps, allocation of resources on them and individuals working with them. And what we were getting fed back is that very often there is perhaps very short time projects. There may be a variety of staff who are called in to help, but children don't get a chance to build that relationship. And I think we're finding as well, is that recognised as being something which is actually desirable, that children have a chance to build relationships which maybe they've never been able to do in their lives before. A lot of the things the children currently are only picked up when they get into trouble. And apart from things like the family intervention services, there's nothing really which is working together with the children and the adults. There's not enough use of what did you call it? Parenting orders within the court system, presumably because of lack of resources. And, we're seeing within local authorities, because, obviously a lot of people from nursing sectors, perhaps who would pick up those problems with children with midwifery in the first 1,000 days. But what happens after that? And then you're looking at local authority interventions where cuts in funding, despite the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which I think we're talking about later, we're not being able to provide services which look to the future and damage limitation for the future. And really, we've got to find some way of crossing the bridge, because you can't just take a whole generation out and then start the interventions with children in very early age, but still expect them to have the right positive influences around them.
Very, very important emphasis on doing parallel work with the parents and think of sustainability. And also the different levels of readiness in the journey for the child's healing. Group number, next group.
Hello.
It's 12 groups.
Oh, I want a number. We want a number.
We work on it.
We had a general conversation. There's a wide range of professionals sitting here, people from Natural Resources Wales, looking at the environment and how the current environment is used to support well-being and future development. Mental health nurses, safeguarding officers with nursing backgrounds, healthy school coordinators and support officers, people concentrating on well-being, and I'm from Play Wales. I think we didn't necessarily come to a consensus, but there was a general feeling that staff working with children are quite skilled at spotting adverse childhood experiences, but perhaps working within, there are some systematic approaches that perhaps need to be changing. So for instance, what are we measuring? What are we counting? What's good enough in school settings? Is it amount of children that attain a certain level of achievement academically, or is their sense of well-being captured? And moving on to that, a feeling that social policy needs to focus on the here and now for children and not just see childhood as preparation for adulthood. So we need to move to a real sense of well-being, not well-becoming. And then moving on from that is the real need for whatever is developed, having a universal approach, any funding mechanisms, any, Alison mentioned frameworks and dots and anything else, but having a universal approach to the way that adverse childhood experiences are either spotted or that children are supported to them.
Wonderful. So we have the cycle of recognize, intervene, and then the nice background of what is well-being. Ambitious but necessary.
Okay, thanks. So we had a general kind of chit-chat. Again, we've got quite a varied group. We mainly kind of thought that research backed up what we thought was true anyway. All of us have collectively, so many years between us, have been working in the field. So it told us what we kind of knew already, I suppose. It was interesting that many of us are involved in either building ACEs specifically into the work that we're doing, or in some way we either work with ACEs at the point of when they're happening, or we're dealing with ACEs after the result of ACEs having happened, such as self-harm, sexual health and the likes. So what we kind of thought in terms of areas of support, that we all highlighted that identification was the first key issue, and how we identify and what the mechanisms for doing that. For some of us, they are identified as a result of coming to our services, but for other people, they might be accessing services that we're working with, and where is our responsibility in terms of identifying them in the first place, and what would we need to do in order to achieve that. So things like training and knowledge building, there are certain places where routine questioning would work, and so it's universal, but we also need to know who to refer to and how to do that in order to feel comfortable, I think, to ask our staff to do that. So I think what would further aid our contribution to tackling ACEs, knowing what would help, really, what it is that we can do. What can we do as individuals or as organisations that can help, and what others can't do as well, and how can we circumnavigate barriers. I think it's called thresholds, but for us where there's barriers and we can't then push families into services or whatever because they don't meet the criteria, and perhaps we have to wait for them to get more critical or more worse before we can access services. What do we do with that?
Wonderful, wonderful both call for action in terms of interdisciplinary work and call for celebrating the expertise that we have. I can see the ACE being able to incorporate that, the ACE hub. The next group. Thank you.
Very diverse range of people sat around the table. But it was very much a conversation about a call to action. So the actions that I guess we're requesting to some extent is access to the resources, in particular access to the video, because it's found that that is very clear in its communication, very understandable. But also that that means communication could be expanded upon in the future, because what is playing out between us in part is because the colleagues are from different backgrounds. There are very subtle nuances playing out in terms of the different ACEs and their effect upon the respective clients, which is apparent in the conversation, which I don't fully understand, but is apparent in the conversation. Which also meant to some extent that we need people to volunteer when we build these new resources to come together to reflect their position in the stuff that we're going to use as well. Second course to action really was trying to understand locally what is available, because we have an atypical conversation where there's such a degree of diversity. How do you bring the right resources to the right person at the right time in order to help them with the issues that they're currently facing? And at that point, I missed a third action. Do we have a third action? Pardon? To take action is the third action. That's it.
Taking action. Interesting emphasis again on we have to have a generalized, integrated approach, but not generalize our one-to-one or bespoke tailoring care for what's needed, and optimizing resources. So for me, it's exciting to see the hub as also a grouping that can do more lobbying directly with the government. Thank you. Do we have 2 more groups, I think?
Hello, my name is Amanda Holland and I'm a lecturer in public health nursing from Cardiff University. The group that we have here today are from Looked After Children's Nurses Services, Substance Misuse, Public Health Wales, Children's Nurses Academia. And what we found useful already from this morning was really coming together to talk about this, to talk about the research. I last attended a session with the NSPCC back at the beginning of last year and nothing since. So, you know, we need to be reinforcing these messages all the time. So we're finding that very useful. We talked about the challenges that we all face in our individual roles and looked at some facilitators to that. I have a background in health visiting, and a facilitator within health visiting is our new Healthy Child Wales programme, which was launched in October last year. Part of that programme will be that we will assess families using a FRAIT tool, which is the Family Resilience Assessment Intervention tool, which is underpinned actually by the ACEs. So this is going to be a tool that will enable health visitors to make assessments very, very early on, before birth, and be able to sort of put plans into action. But of course, that is obviously if the resources are available in individual areas, which, you know, is a big challenge in itself, and it isn't equitable. And it's about services coming together, working together. For example, we have Flying Start in Wales, which is a health visiting service. It's targeted. It works intensively with families where issues like this are identified. And it's very enabling. It has many, many services to help families. However, the generic health visiting service isn't quite as fortunate. But the coming together of services using assessment tools like FRAIT, underpinned by the ACEs, will really help us move forward. So we're quite excited about that within the health visiting service. Also, as educators, we thought about the need for us to bring this in very early on in nursing education, as the mental health students said over there, really, so that it is everybody's business. It's not just adult nursing, not just child nursing, mental health, it's everyone. So it's that joined up approach.
Wonderful, the academics are speaking. So we, just to emphasize, just to take one of the take-home message there, it's everybody's business, and also look at the training, not only of the existing staff, but integrate this approach as part of curriculum programs across universities. Wonderful, thank you. I'm aware of the time, but this is so important. I think we just carry on. 2 more groups, I believe.
Okay. Sorry. Bits of paper and adding on little bits, so I'm trying to pull it all together very quickly for you. I'm Helen Crosby. My background is health visiting, and the vast majority of our group are also from the health visiting service, but we've also got somebody from the perinatal mental health team and also County Council policy officer. So we had quite a diverse discussion. But basically some of the things that we found helpful was just focusing on recognising what we already do. As health visitors, there is a recognition that for years we've been collecting lots of information, probably not using it in maybe the most effective way, but we do have, you know, lots of resources that we already have that we could build upon. We talked about having a universal approach, working jointly with other services, sharing what we have. I mean, Tracy and I's experience of working with the 1000 days, we've been part of where we've been conducting a scoping exercise, I guess, of all the assessments that families in the first 1000 days undertake, and they're absolutely huge. We don't share that information with other services, so families have the experience of having to go through that again and again and again. And you know, I think that's a key point for us. We really need to share some of that information. We talked about drawing on commonalities. It should be around children, not only around finance. We know that finance is scarce, but we need to find better ways of working and maybe focus our attention on other things, you know, the things that really help families rather than things that help us and our data collection processes. Right. What else do we say? Yeah, we said about early identification of the ACEs in parents. We talked around normalising ACEs and sharing the information maybe with families. We talked about how in the antenatal periods, we used to, going back 20 years ago, we used to have really good groups that were open to all. It was non-stigmatizing, and showing that film in groups like that with parents before they've had their children, where, as I said, is non-stigmatizing, just helps to heighten their awareness. Sorry, and just looking again at the visions for all of our services and just highlighting priorities again. Sorry, was there something I missed out? There was such a long list, but we're short of time.
Very helpful.
Is that? I think that's it in a nutshell.
It's wonderful. It's archiving what we have and with the guidance. And I think the call for moral and social action, the film was beautiful and normalizing, yet holding responsibility where it belongs through support. So it's wonderful. Thank you. Final group, is that right? 2 more groups, 3 more groups. Okay, 1 minute, please, if that's okay, because I'm eating into your break. Okay, 3 more groups.
Oh, me first, yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Helen Morgan. I'm on secondment at the moment from Rhondda and Taff Council, where I was partnerships manager, so working quite locally on issues like this, to the Future Generations Commissioner's Office. Our group was a mix, really, of researchers, practitioners, strategists, I suppose, and we've echoed many of the messages that have come through already. The research resonated with our group, as you'd expect, and it provides some really useful evidence from Wales for the first time to inform people, creating a case for change and a real opportunity for more integration and collaboration across services. Further accessible tools like the videos, like I have said, like the easy-to-use infographics will really help to show other colleagues who maybe don't work with people as often as some of the people in the room today do around ACEs, or have never looked at recognising them and understanding the behaviours and effects of them. Working more together, some of the barriers, I suppose, that are in the way are around the fact that we are, as been said in the room already, lots of us are working on very connected but separate funded programmes. So how do we work better together, really, and remove some of those barriers to enable local authorities, health boards, fire and rescue services, Natural Resources Wales, all of us to work better together around this important issue. Thank you.
Wonderful. Working together for a better together. Wonderful. There we go, the penultimate group.
Hi, I'm Kate Burton, and in our group we had a mixture of staff working for NHS Wales Performance Management and Public Health Wales. There was a wide experience in the group of working with both adults and children who'd experienced ACEs. And what we all found from our practice, there wasn't much explicit discussion around ACEs, although we were all aware that everyone had experienced them. But ACEs would give a clearer structure for discussion with service users. And that our experience was that services could often be dismissive of people who didn't fit within our current service structures, and they're often people who had experienced a higher number of ACEs. And so conversations around ACEs, being more explicit around that, could assist with services being more flexible and responsive to people in need. And would also give staff more understanding about how people build and maintain relationships, in terms of how staff build relationships with service users. We were hoping in the future for there to be more information, toolkits or guidance coming out for, to enable services to use ACEs more explicitly in their work. And also, we were looking at how consideration of ACEs in future policy developments that join up both adult and child policies and physical and mental health policies as well was really important.
Good emphasis on remembering that ACEs not only affect the current child, but the adult, and on effective practice. Thank you. Who is the final group? That's it, you're the special group.
Oh yeah, I know. I'll be really quick. We had a cross-section of Families First, Health, Public Health and Housing, and really just wanted to fly the housing banner at this stage, really. The things that we found helpful were the ideas around transition points in people's lives as being a key conversation point for us to have conversations about ACEs. Also, your point about support needed for staff who are impacted by knowing or uncovering early trauma. And we talked about some solutions to that. And that idea of a cross-sector language and understanding, particularly from a housing perspective, that's really needed for the housing sector to understand how this is relevant to them too. The areas of support we would need would be about demystifying the ACEs conversation and intervention for staff. This isn't about moving thresholds up or needing to refer everything up. So in that, staff would need confidence and skills, but that's about looking what assets are already present too. The principle of do no harm, whilst making every contact count, that felt huge to us. If we want to make every contact count, how do we do that safely? And what would be the lever, the statutory requirement or the hook? Is there going to be some national guidance for public services? But from a housing perspective, dare I say it, is there a business case? Because if you are taking a trauma-informed approach to, for example, non-eviction policies, antisocial behaviour, are you then reducing evictions and re-traumatising families, but also saving social landlords money? So just personally, we need to promote psychologically informed environments and supported accommodation, because you've got captive audience of people who've experienced 4 or more ACEs, particularly young people. And also reflective practice, that's already good practice, that helps staff support in their work in dealing with this trauma.
Wonderful. Reflexive practice and also the hierarchy of needs, the housing needs. Interesting about the transition points, because it brings us back to the conversation of we have to have a general move forward, but there have to be points where we can maybe usefully meet and do something and monitor what we do. As anticipated, this is a wealth of knowledge, and I will not add anything to it because it resonates and it's a good echo to stay with us over the break. If I may invite for the round of applause for all the opening that you did and a nice 10 minutes coffee.